Good morning and welcome again. I'm going to share some favorites with you this morning here. I brought two of my favorite books along. I'm going to be sharing some passages later with you. But I want to begin with a story about a man who decided to give up something for Lent. An Irishman moves into a hamlet in County Kerry, and he walks into the pub, promptly orders 3 beers. The bartender raises his eyebrows, but he serves the man the 3 beers, which he drinks quietly at the table, alone. About an hour later, the man has finished the 3 beers and he orders 3 more. And this happens yet again. Now, the next evening, the man orders and drinks 3 more beers at a time. And this happens several times. Soon, the entire town is whispering about the man who orders 3 beers. Finally, a week later, the bartender broaches the subject on behalf of the town. And he says, sir, I don't mean to pry, but folks around here, they're wondering why you always order 3 beers. 'Tis odd, isn't it? The man replied. Well, you see, I have 2 brothers. And one of them went to America and the other one went to Australia. We promised each other that we would always order an extra 2 beers wherever we drank, as a way of keeping in touch with and keeping the family bond. The bartender and the whole town were pleased with this answer. And then one day the man came in and he ordered only 2 beers. The bartender poured them with a heavy heart. And this continued for the rest of the evening. Each time, he ordered only 2 beers. The word flew around the town that perhaps he had lost one of his brothers, and prayers were offered for the soul of this one brother. The next day, the bartender said to the man, folks around here, me first of all, want to offer our condolences to you for the death of your brother. You know, the 2 beers instead of the 3 and all. And the man pondered this for a moment, and then he replied, well, you'll be happy to hear that my 2 brothers are alive and well. It's just that I myself have decided to give up drinking for Lent. Understood. It took me a while. We are all under a lot of pressure these days to get out there, to get in the world, to be active, to make changes, to make the world a better place, okay? And there's a lot of pressure. We're also pressured to do something with our lives, to be a success at something. This is such a do-it-yourself society here that a lot of people think that they actually have to do it themselves. And consequently, not many have learned how to ask for help from other people and how to ask for help from God when it's needed. Instead, people become anxious and angry or discouraged or depressed despite their best efforts when things don't turn out as they should and when they experience failure. This message today is about how we can stop sweating the small stuff and stop sweating the big stuff, okay? By learning how to give this stuff over to God. Trusting that divine love, divine order, and divine guidance are working in us and through us to help us achieve what it is we need to achieve. Help us know that God is on the case. One reason I think that people have difficulty trusting God, turning things over to God, is because of their God concept. You know, the Old Testament God pictured a very vengeful, wrathful, angry, capricious, man-like being up in the sky that looked down on us and punished us when we made mistakes. You know, if I had that kind of concept of God, it'd be difficult for me to trust in that being. It would be good for me. It would be difficult for me to surrender to that kind of God. But Jesus in the New Testament came and brought us a whole new kind of God. And the God that Jesus spoke about was, he said, God is spirit. Those who worship God must worship in spirit. And he spoke about a loving God, a God that wanted the best for us. In fact, wanted us to experience joy and happiness and abundant living. And so this was a totally different kind of God concept. Some fifth graders had wonderful God concepts. A teacher in a Christian school asked her class to work on TV commercials. And what they had to do was to use them in 20 ways to communicate ideas about God. And here are some of their responses here. God is like Bayer aspirin. He works miracles. God is like a Ford. He got a better idea. God is like Coke. He's the real thing. God is like Hallmark cards. He cares enough to send his very best. God is like Tide. He gets the stains out that others leave behind. God is like General Electric. He brings good things to life. God is like Walmart. He has everything. God is like Alka-Seltzer. Try him. You'll like him. God is like invisible Scotch tape. You can't see him, but you know that he's there. God is like Delta. He's ready when you are. God is like Allstate. You're in good hands with him. God is like VO5 hairspray. He holds all kinds of things in any kind of weather. God is like Dial soap. Aren't you glad you have him? Don't you wish everybody did? God is like the U.S. Post Office. Neither rain, nor snow, nor sleet, nor ice will keep him from his appointed destination. God is like Chevrolet, the heartbeat of America. God is like Maxwell House, good to the very last drop. God is like, I like this one best. God is like Bounty. He is the quicker picker-upper and can handle the tough jobs, and he won't fall apart on you. God is like the Energizer Bunny. He keeps going and going and going. Well, Easter is not only about the bunny, okay? It is also about surrendering and being changed into a greater expression of God, a great expression of this Christ self that we speak about here in Unity. Easter, which is coming up, and we're working through this season of Lent toward the Easter process, the Easter experience here, is about letting go of the bondage that we feel to past experiences. It's about letting go of unforgiveness. It's about letting go of fear, of worries, of guilt over past failures. And it is about being able to move ahead past all these and enter the work that God wants us to be involved in. And so this means that Easter is not just one time a year. It's an ongoing process, because we are always engaged in the process of change, changing our attitudes, changing our thoughts, changing our behaviors, letting go of what no longer brings us a sense of peace, of connectedness with God and others, and joy. We're always being moved by Spirit to step into the unknown and to trust that God has a plan for us. In Jeremiah 29:11, God speaks about this plan in these words. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and to keep you from harm. Plans to give you hope and a future. Stepping into the unknown and trusting God with our present and our future requires surrender. And because many people think that surrender is a giving up, surrender is some type of failure, some people are uncomfortable with this idea of surrendering ourselves, surrendering our hopes, surrendering our fears to God. Unity Minister Kelly Isola describes surrender as an inner opening. She speaks of this inner opening as opening up a door to the sanctuary that's within us. In an article called Being Veronica, Isola wrote that when we open this inner sanctuary, we engage our heart and we open our mind to wisdom. And from this, we can move forward into the activities that we're guided with strength and with courage. She wrote that Jesus did this same thing. He opened that door within him to that Christ self. And Christ in unity is that pattern of perfection that indwells each one of us. It is that spark of God that we can get only from God. It is that of God which is only begotten from God in us, the Christ. It is this presence of God in us that helps us unfold in certain ways. It is the plan for us to be perfectly expressing this Christ self in us. Understanding this and finding ways to express this presence is the Easter process. We are being transformed from seekers because we know where God is now. So we're not seeking. We are expressors, learning to be conscious expressors of this God presence in us. Isola wrote that Jesus surrendered to an inner opening, and when he did this, he became a powerful energy, a powerful force for healing, for prosperity, for love in humanity itself. This idea of surrender, or of giving ourselves or giving everything that concerns us over to God, can be frightening to some. But it doesn't mean that we have to give up the truth that we know. It doesn't mean that we have to give up that which is sacred to us. It doesn't mean that we have to give up the people and experiences that have nurtured us. What we have to give up is the attachment to all of these things, because all of these things change. There's a statement that you can never walk or step into a river twice, because it's always flowing, it's always changing. And so is everything in our lives, always changing. We are not the same from moment to moment, from day to day. I'd like to share one of my favorite stories about letting go. This comes from Richard Bach's book, Illusions. You may recall it, or may remember this story. It is a story that the reluctant master in this book gives to the crowds of people who keep thronging him, wanting him to teach them and to heal them. Okay? And one day, he gives them this story. Once there lived a village of creatures along the bottom of a great crystal river, and the current of the river swept over them. Young and old, rich and poor, the crystal river flowed over all of them. The current going its own way, knowing its own crystal self. And each creature in their own manner clung tightly to the twigs and the rocks at the river bottom, because clinging was their way of life. This is what they had been taught since they were born. They resisted the current, and each had done this since their birth. But there was one creature who said at last, "I'm tired of clinging, and though I can't see it, I think that this river knows where it's going. I'm going to let go and let the river carry me where it will." And the other creatures laughed at him and cried out, "You fool! Okay. If you let go, this current that you worship is going to smash you up against the rocks." And he didn't heed them. He took a breath and he let go. And at once, the current smashed him up against the rocks. After he healed up, he decided he was going to do it again. He was going to try again. So he took a breath and he let go. And this time, the current lifted him free from the bottom. And he went in the current down river. And as he passed a community of other little creatures who were at the river bottom holding to the rocks and twigs, they looked up at him and they said, "See, a miracle. He looks like us, but he flies." And then they began to say, "Look, the Messiah come to save us. The Messiah came to save us." And the one carried in the stream said, "No, I'm not the Messiah, not any more than you are. The river chooses and delights to carry us free if we'll just let go." But they cried all the more, "Savior, Savior." And when they looked again, he was gone, carried in the stream. The question here is, what are the rocks and the twigs that we might be holding on to, refusing to let go of? Allowing our holding on to these things to be excuses for us not moving forward in our lives, for us not giving up those things that we need to release in our lives. One of my favorite books, The Exquisite Risk by Mark Nepo, speaks about this flowing river that carries us. And I'd like to share a story with you. It's called Steering Our Way to Center. Drifting and steering. Though we can't see it, our life is carried in an open vessel that mystics have called the soul. Think of it as a canoe. Anyone who has been in a canoe or a rowboat knows that if left alone on the water, the boat will begin to drift. In a stream or a river, the current will carry us, but we need, from time to paddle or to row, to steer our way back to where the current is clear and strong. And this gives us a way to understand our journey here on earth, for at the center of the stream of life is the unstoppable current of spirit, the energy of oneness, the vital original presence that all beings have longed for. This is the purpose of faith, Nepo writes, to believe that this current is there, and it has purpose, and it knows where it's going, and through, even though we can't see it. And this is the purpose of will, to correct our drifting with a paddle here or paddle there, not trying to do it all by ourselves, but trying to restore our native position in the ancient and immediate current so that it can carry us into tomorrow. This image also gives us a way to understand our humanness and our need for inner practice. For when a canoe drifts left or right, or it gets stuck in the roots of an old willow, it's not wrong or lacking character. It's just being a canoe. Likewise, our rush to judge ourselves or to judge others for what goes wrong or not as we've planned is a distraction from engaging the nature of living, which is, he says, drifting and steering. With discernment, but without judgment, the human journey is one of steering our way back to the center of self, where God is. And another favorite of mine, this is a book called Stranger by the River, and it was written by Paul Twitchell, who is the founder of the modern-day spiritual path called Eckankar. Now, Eckankar means path of the eternal. And I love this book because it's very inspirational. There is a master in this book, Rebazar Tars, and he's called the Traveler. And the seeker in this book is the one who approaches this master and asks about life, about death, about love, about wisdom, and all these questions. And this particular one is on true surrender. Rebazar Tars, or the Traveler, shares what true surrender is. There is a law, Rebazar says, if you wish to call it a law, but I say an aspect of God, which reverses itself. The harder man tries to do something with his conscious will, the less apt he is to succeed. proficiency. And the result of proficiency comes only to those who have learned the paradoxical art of simultaneously doing and not doing. The combination of relaxation and activity, letting go as a person in order that God may take hold. To the limit of your mental and physical potentialities, letting go. So I tell you, if you're consciously striving to become one with God, you're apt to lose everything you have gained. By intention to bring yourself into harmony with the light, you will instantly be taken from it. Did not Jesus say that whoever tried to save his life would lose it? Then I tell you this, to seek the light consciously is to lose it. To talk of God and the aspects of God is to keep him from thee. And to seek him is to have him always fleeing before thee. So you ask then, how does man find God? And I tell you this, the way to God is to surrender to God with thyself completely and fully, so that nothing else can stand between thee and him. Surrender is the only way. The surest way to find him is to let God take over soul. Open yourself to him constantly, to this wisdom and this love, and trust to this effect. And this sounds a little curious at first, but then if you think about it, if you're always seeking something, you are telling yourself you never have it. You're always putting it off somewhere else. If you're seeking God, you're not recognizing you already have that presence in you. If you're seeking the light, what you are essentially saying is you don't recognize that that light is already in you. So, in a sense, what Paul Twitchell is saying in this book, Rebazar is saying, is that we don't have to seek this. We just have to discover it and realize this presence, this light. We have everything we need already within us. You will reach the true bliss of the Lord when soul is polarized with the eternal self. That is when you see constantly the divine in all things and beings and happenings. Your heart will be consumed when all your emotions are summed up in the love of the divine itself for itself, but also love of the divine in everything, in other people, in creatures, in the whole of creation. You are able to see the presence and love of God. Beyond life is God, and man must go beyond the transformation of his superficial, narrow, and human way of thinking, seeing, feeling, and being into the deep and wide spiritual consciousness and the integrated God self that is in the realm called the kingdom of heaven within. The source of eternal bliss is the God self in all. I think that's a beautiful way of saying that surrender, or being willing to let God move in and through us, is the source of all that we need, the source of the joy that we seek, the light that we seek. Okay? And let's prepare for our meditation.